Hi, this is Hank with the Author Stories podcast. Before we get into this week's episode, I want to tell you about our sponsors this week. Scrivener is a piece of software that I have used for over a year now, and it's more than just a word processor. Scrivener is an entire environment for writers that lets you not only write, but organize all of your writing, outline. It has a great corkboard view, which a lot of people love, which is a visual way for laying out your book before you get started. Folders to track character sketches, places to hold information and notes, everything that you could ever imagine that goes into your creative process, Scrivener can handle. If you go to getscrivener.com and use the coupon code HANK, you can get 20% off the already low price. I would also like to thank ThirdScribe for sponsoring the podcast. ThirdScribe is an author website solution that allows authors to connect with readers in a very unique way. Imagine if Facebook and WordPress have a baby, and then that baby is raised by librarians. It grows up, falls in love with a beautiful web designer, and together they bring literary fulfillment to millions. That's ThirdScribe. Go check out ThirdScribe.com today.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Author Stories podcast, where we bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. This week, my very special guest is Kevin G. Summers. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Thanks, Hank.
So, I like to begin each one of our interviews by asking you what brought you to this life of writing. Was there a lifelong passion to be a writer, or is this something, what was your path to getting here is what I'm asking.
Well, writing is pretty much the only thing that I ever wanted to do when I was growing up. My mom was taking graduate studies classes at George Mason University, and I don't really know how she was able to do this, but she brought me into the classes, and a lot of times, and she was taking classes with huge authors like John Garner and John Irving. And
now,
I was
George Mason in D.C.?
Yeah, it's in the suburbs of D.C. in
Okay.
Fairfax County. So, she would go and take these classes, and I was 6 years old, 8 years old, and I'd sit in the back of the room and listen in, and then afterwards they would go out to these to this little pizza joint, which was really a bar, and they'd sit around and eat pizza and drink beer, and of course they'd get me a Coke or something, but it would be like 11 o'clock on a weeknight. I was an only child, as I'm sure you can tell, and they would sit there in this bar and they'd talk about writing and stuff, and I would get drug along, and I just thought that these writers were the coolest people in the world, and that's what I wanted to do. And so I read a lot. I was very solitary as a child, and that was what I was interested in, and of course I was good at it. I had a natural talent at it, and so I took to that. And back in the 80s and 90s, early 90s, I was the guidance counselors and the teachers and stuff would discourage you from trying to pursue a artistic career, and they were trying to steer me towards accounting and this, that, and the other thing, and I sucked at that kind of stuff. But
something honorable.
Yeah, exactly. Something that would make money, and then I could
Right.
do this in my free time. So
well, what's the classic thing? Well, you've got to have something to fall back on.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, it was all I ever really wanted to do, and I had some talents in other artistic areas as well, and I hit this point where I realized that I had to, if I wanted to be good at writing, I just had to do that, and so I just let all those other things go, and I just stopped even dabbling in them, and just devoted all my time to writing, all my free time anyway, and that's how I got here.
So what was the first thing that you completed?
Well, I completed this terrible, unpublishable novel.
Yeah.
Back in the mid '90s, and I got to the end, and I mean it was bad, but it was it was the kind of thing that every writer has to go to. I think where they just learn what to do. I actually completed 3 novels like that were full length, got to the end, edited it, and realized that it was just not salvageable. And so, I had to move on from there and write short stories. But I have these 3 terrible novels that they'll never be in my papers. They'll be destroyed.
What genre were you writing in?
2 of them were, I guess, literary fiction, and one of them was fantasy.
Okay. Is fantasy something that you naturally gravitate toward?
It is. I read a lot of fantasy. I love it. It's probably my favorite genre. But I have a fantasy novel in me, like a true fantasy with elves and swords and stuff. But I'm not ready to write it yet. I want to write one that's not just Lord of the Rings revisited, So
right.
I'm not quite there yet.
I have one of those also, I think, and there's a big 400,000 word epic fantasy in there somewhere.
Well, I love that kind of stuff, but it's so much of it is derivative. I heard your podcast the other day where you were talking about Patrick Rothfuss, and I had given up on reading fantasy for a number of years until I read his 2 books, and they made me love fantasy again because they were innovative. They were fresh.
Yeah, really breathed new life into the genre, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, between him and Brandon Sanderson, which some of his work has the kind of tends toward derivative, but he throws some pretty cool twists in and tries to mix it up some. But anyway.
Absolutely, and there's a guy named Brian Staveley, The Emperor's Blades, and his was, I read his just over the summer or something, and it was the same way. It was quite good. It was like Game of Thrones if you cut out all the boring parts.
Right. Tell me about Star Trek. You got to write in that universe, didn't you? What?
I did. So in the 90s and in the early 2000s, there was an open call Star Trek anthology called Strange New Worlds. It ran for 10 years, and Dean Wesley Smith was the poor bastard that had to read the thousands upon thousands of submissions for this thing. Open call. And this was before the indie publishing revolution. And, if you wanted to write Star Trek, the only thing that you could do really was do fanfic.
Right.
And, so they opened this thing up, and it ran for 3 years initially before I ever heard of it. I picked up Strange New Worlds Volume 3, and I read through the stories, and I thought, I could write a Star Trek story. And so I wrote a DS9 story, and I submitted it. I did I did one take through it. I didn't outline it. I just totally pantsed the whole story. And it ended up winning third place in the anthology. And then they nominated it for the Nebula Award. I didn't win, but it looked really great on my cover letters.
Heck yeah.
And so anyway, that story was called Isolation Ward 4. It was set in the DS9 universe, and it was about Benny Russell. I don't know if you remember the episode where Cisco, where it was in a 1950s science fiction writer. And mine was told from the point of view of his racist white psychiatrist.
Oh my gosh.
So it was a cool story. I'm really proud of that story. And it's still, some people still remember it to this day. And that opened up the opportunity to write for them again. I did a second Strange New World story in Volume 8. And then I also was in an anthology called Prophecy and Change, which was the 10th anniversary of DS9. And then my editor was laid off, and that opportunity dried up. And that was it. No more chances for Star Trek for me.
Oh, man. Now, I'm assuming you were a Star Trek fan growing up?
Oh, absolutely. I watched the original series and all the movies with my mom.
Oh, yeah.
And then I watched Next Generation and DS9, and I loved Star Trek, and then I watched Star Trek Nemesis, and then I couldn't stand to watch it for several years, about 5 years.
Yeah.
That movie was so bad.
Yes, yes. I'm assuming that you and I are pretty close in age. And I remember as a kid seeing the original series in reruns. I'm not quite that old, but seeing in reruns. And then I guess I don't know, maybe about 10 or so when the original motion picture came out. And then getting to watch that franchise unfold, every year or 2 or 3 years, whatever it was, as the movies came out. Um, and, just getting to live in that universe in my head. I can only imagine getting to be officially sanctioned as, getting to write a piece of that universe has to be pretty amazing.
Oh, it was awesome. I loved doing it. It's so much harder than you would think.
Oh, I can imagine.
Because, yeah, you're trying to fact check all this stuff and, make sure that you don't screw it up and write like a really lame Star Trek story. And, the fans are so hardcore about it.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I loved doing it. It was a pleasure to do it, and I'm glad to be writing original stuff, but to have that on my resume is just really cool, and I look back very fondly on those books.
Now, that's interesting that you said the perspective that you wrote it from. And Star Trek has been renowned for its ability to take different cultural issues and look at them from a different angle. Did you get any response from that story that you wrote?
Oh, I did. So, like I said, that story was told from the point of view of Dr. Wyckoff, who was the character of Damar, the Cardassian, as a human in the 50s, racist 50s on Earth.
Right.
And so I told it, in first person and tried to do it in his voice. And of course, he used some words that are not appropriate any longer. And I tried to use them accurately in his voice. And it's the story of how he changes once he's exposed to this story over time, which I'm sure you are aware is a theme I'm fond of,
Right.
the power of literature to change people. And I had several people were kind of offended by the language that was in that story, but more people than not were not. They were moved by it. There was a lot of people that seemed to be moved by what I was trying to do there. So I tried to write the most classic Star Trek-y story with people looking in mirrors and seeing their reflection that I could possibly do.
Yeah. Well, and that should be the job of good literature, is exposing the darkness in us for what it is, and truthfully looking at it, but also hopefully showing that we can come out the other side of that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the great books that move people and change us as a culture, or more importantly, change us as individuals, are those are the books that people love. Those are what the classics are. The Grapes of Wrath, books like that. Our Town, that they shape our culture. They tell us who we are in a way that nonfiction really can't do.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's what's great about Star Trek. That's what's great about any kind of literature, really.
Yeah. Were there any other anthologies that you got to be a part of?
I did a couple. There was an anthology of Wizard of Oz horror stories that I did a story in, and there's this outfit called Freedom Forge Press, and they did an anthology of stories based on freedom, and it was an unusual anthology because it was fiction and nonfiction. And I actually turned in a nonfiction piece about John Brown. But I used to teach writing, and what was really cool about that is I used to have I would have my students write stories based on actual open call anthologies, and that Forging Freedom was one that I had given to my students to write, freedom themed stories. And I had one of my students; they also got selected to be in that. So I had me and one of my students were both in this anthology together.
Oh, cool. Where did you teach?
I taught at a community college in Northern Virginia, and I taught there for about 7 years, I want to say.
Yeah.
I don't teach there anymore, but I enjoyed doing it. It was fun. It was something I always kind of wanted to try my hand at. It's extremely time consuming.
Yes.
To deal with the homework, and sometimes you get students and they're just exceptional, and it's a pleasure to try to guide them. And then other times you get students that there's just no hope for them, and you have to be the one to, try to encourage them. But there's just nothing that you can really do. It's just hopeless. But I worked with this gal. I had this gal as a student named Tori Chase, and she writes Christian interracial romance novels. And she's awesome. She's got this, she's got a bunch of books.
Specific.
Yeah, it's really unusual. But she's got a bunch of stories out, and they're really popular. And she's, like an up and coming name in the romance genre. And she's. I knew right away that she was a talented young woman, and she's. It's all her. I guided her a little bit, but it's really her talent and sitting down and putting in the hours, as is the key.
Well, as someone who has taught writing, do you think that writing can effectively be taught, or is there some sort of innate gift that is shaped more than can you teach someone to tell a story?
I don't think so. I think that they have to already come to the table with something, and you can give them some tools. You can sharpen their skills, but really they have to have something in them to begin with. And maybe it's something that they don't see really well, and you can bring it out of them. But if they don't have the innate skills, then I don't think that they can do it. I think it's to a degree, it's something that you're just born with.
Yeah, I think so too. And
I feel like my main thing that I did was teaching them how to harness that talent or have discipline to use that talent, because a lot of writers are, I don't know if you have this problem, but I certainly do. Writers are lazy and self-indulgent. And I felt like a lot of what I was trying to do was just teach my students not to be that way, or at least how to deal with being lazy and self-indulgent.
Yeah, and learning where the Wi-Fi switch is on your laptop to kill the internet. That could be a class right there. Speaking of lazy and self-indulgent, but tell me about the Paladin.
Okay, well, there was this. This is the story that killed several small publishers. There was this.
This is going to be a good story.
I hope so. There was this this small press that was going to do a collection of superhero short stories, and one of my friends told me about it, and I thought it looked cool, so I wrote this story, and I turned it into them, and it got accepted. And then they disappeared off the face of the earth for a few months, and then they announced that they were going under and the anthology was dead. And then another small press picked it up, and they hired an artist, and they were to do cover, and they were going through edits on the book. And then they disappeared off the face of the earth for a few months, and then they came back and they told us the anthology was dead. And then a third small press, who was run by the artist, they picked up the book, and they finally got it to be released. So it got released, and it managed to kill 2 small presses. So I was like, this story is cursed, or this anthology is cursed. And so I, it was out for a little while, and like a lot of these small presses, I admire what they try to do, but they have the real problem of not having any platform.
Right.
And so they release something and it sells 12 copies, and then that's it. They rely on the platforms of the authors, and in a lot of instances, maybe in most instances, the authors don't have a platform either, which is the case with this one. None of us had really any platform, and the book just didn't sell real well. So anyway, when the contract expired or whatever, I took it and I released it as just as an ebook by myself, without the other authors in the anthology. And I did a new cover because I had this vision of something different, I guess. And the cover that you see on my webpage or on Amazon is my brother-in-law. I dressed him up in this superhero costume and took this picture.
Nice.
Yeah, he's a good-looking kid.
That's awesome. So now, as someone who has written for a number of years now, and you have gotten to kind of watch this ebook self-publishing revolution happen, because you were publishing traditionally, through the anthologies and different things like that, and I think you definitely got to see firsthand the problem that a lot of people don't necessarily get to see with the small presses, and a lot of writers struggling to get published, and they go with a small press, and then you don't have the platform and all that. How have you seen the industry and publishing in general change over these last few years?
Well, that's a great question. When I was doing my class, when I initially started it in 2007, I mean, my students would ask me about self-publishing, and back even just a few years ago, I would have to tell them, don't do it. There's a stigma around it, and if you do it, all the serious authors will look down their nose at you. And in my class, we were covering how to write query letters, and how to look for agents, and do you really need an agent, that kind of thing. And I kept feeling like something was going to happen, as Kindles were coming out and iPads
Right.
were coming out and people were talking about it. I kept feeling like something was going to happen, and I was watching, and to me it was wool that really was the thing that exploded it and made it so that people looked at indie publishing, self-publishing in a new light, and it could earn some respect. And I mean, I can tell you that among a lot of traditional authors that I know, I think they still don't really respect it. Some of the older ones, they still might look down their nose at it. And then there's younger ones that are, looking at indie publishing and seeing people go off and do all these great things, and they are kind of straddling the line, straddling the fence, seeing if maybe they want to get their hand into it. But going back to the small presses, it's I came out of Star Trek and I didn't have any platform at all. I had some friends on Facebook or whatever. I didn't have a Facebook author page. I didn't have an email list. I didn't have anything, and most of my Star Trek fans did not translate into fans of my other work. They were fans of Star Trek, not of Kevin G. Summers.
Right.
So I basically had to start from nothing, and I started in 2013 really on a platform. I didn't have anything before that. I had maybe 10 fans, if that, 5 fans. I don't know, almost nothing.
Well, now the conventional wisdom would tell you, and I've heard this throughout the years, one of the paths to traditional publishing would be to write some short fiction and get included in some anthologies and things like that. And there's not much of a bigger anthology that you could become a part of than a Star Trek one, as far as broad reach. but that did not translate into an instant traditional publishing career.
Well, not for me. I mean, part of it is a great part of it is my own fault. I was lazy, and I would write one or two short stories a year, and I was slowly working on a novel, which was the fantasy novel. And I should have been sitting down and writing every single day, and I wasn't. And when I finally churned out this fantasy novel, I sent it out all over the place, and I got a lot of people to read it, a lot of agents, a lot of publishers to read it, and it just wasn't good enough because I didn't have really the hours invested that I would have needed to have.
Right.
So all the writing credits, traditional writing credits that I had, I was following the way that you're supposed to do it, and I had ample opportunity to to pitch books and pitch comic book series and various things, but it didn't work out because I wasn't ready, which was, really goes to show, you need to be investing the time in improving your craft and not just resting on your laurels, which is what I was doing.
So what was the next project that came along after you pitched the fantasy novel and it didn't get the traction that you wanted to? How did you? Yeah, a lot of people would just give up after that point. What kept you writing?
I can't imagine not writing.
Right.
That's the thing that I love, and it's the thing that I've always wanted to do, and I can't imagine not doing it. But I knew that I had to just take a step back and reevaluate. And so I had my class that I was teaching, and I saw that this small press was coming up with a Kurt Vonnegut themed anthology. Kurt is my favorite author. I love him. And I wrote this story for the anthology, and I had my class do it. And that same student that was in the Freedom anthology also wrote a Vonnegut story and sold it to this anthology. And so I was real proud of this young gal. She was like 19 years old. My story, they never received it, and it broke my heart because I love Kurt and I wanted to have a story in this anthology. It was a tribute to Kurt Vonnegut. And then I also had this story that I had put an enormous amount of effort into for something that was only 7,000 words or something. And I couldn't sell it anywhere because he had such a distinct style, and I tried to write in that voice. And I tried a bunch of traditional small presses, magazines and things to sell this story, and I kept getting, personal rejection letters telling me how much they loved it and how they couldn't use it.
Is that the Bell Curse?
That's the Bell Curse. So Kindle Worlds suddenly announced that they had acquired the license to do World of Kurt Vonnegut fanfic, and I was
Awesome.
like, well, shoot, I can have the first one out of the gate. So they opened it up, and I turned it in, within 24 hours, and
Wow.
So mine was the first one out of the gate, and I at that point was still on the fence about whether or not indie publishing was legit, but I had no other option with this story, and so I published it.
Well, and you had a finished story ready to go. That's
Right.
That's a
Exactly.
pretty cherry position to be in.
Exactly. And so, it started getting reviews, and they were mostly really nice reviews, which was cool because I've like I said, been a fan of Kurt Vonnegut for years and years and years. I know his voice really well, and I felt like I was capable of writing in that voice. And so this is what happened is Michael Bunker was commissioned by Kindle Worlds to write a Kurt Vonnegut novel, which is Osage Two Diamonds, which is way better than Pennsylvania, let me tell you. And he went on to Kindle Worlds and bought some Vonnegut stories that were already out there to see what other people were doing. And he bought mine because it had the most ratings. And he read it, and we got to talking because I don't know, I saw on Twitter or something that he read it. We got to talking, and we realized that we had a lot of stuff in common with farming and stuff like that. And so we were just talking on Facebook for most of the rest of 2013, and then in the beginning of 2014, he said, "Hey, you wanna write something together?" And by this point, I was pretty much decided that I was going to try indie publishing, and I'd released a short story called Number 38, and it got didn't sell real well, but it got some nice reviews and things, and anyway, so I had already decided I was going to embrace it, and I was literally just about to start writing a new project when he contacted me and said, "Let's do something together." And so I said, "Okay, absolutely. I'd love to ride your coattails to fame, Michael." And he wanted to write something based on his Bombo Dawson character from the Hugh Howey Must Die book. And so I read the book, and I thought about this absurd character and came up with an absurd character of my own. And I had the Legendarium idea kind of sitting in my back pocket, but I didn't know how to do it and make it not suck, because I was thinking about doing it as a serious story instead of as a comedy. And when I realized that it would have legs as a satire piece and it would not as a serious piece, I pitched it and he loved it, and we worked on it in the beginning of 2014, and we released it in middle of March and exploded. It did real well. And then, of course, you saw what happened in the beginning of this month with the audiobook.
Yeah, that was pretty nuts, wasn't it?
I've known people that have gotten the daily deals, but I never thought it would happen to me, and it happened, and oh my gosh, it was awesome. We sold an unbelievable amount of books, and I think some people probably took the Alister Foley character a little personally, but
why do you say that?
Well, we have a 54, 55 reviews on Amazon that are all 4 and 5 star. Right. And then we've got some 1-star reviews from some pretty hostile people on Audible.
And did it hit a little close to home for them, do you think?
I think it might have just a little close to home.
From the elbow patch crowd?
Yeah, and I was trying to poke fun at myself as much as anything. I mean, I don't leave 1-star reviews for people, but there's a certain element out there that does it. And anyway, I think Alister bothered some folks, but for the most part, it's had really, really positive reception, and people asking us to write the sequel and stuff.
Well, as we say in Mississippi, bless their heart.
Yeah, bless their hearts.
Yeah, bless their hearts. That's which is Southern for "you're an idiot," but that's what's the process like when you co-write a book with someone?
Well, the way that our process is I wrote the first draft. Michael took my first draft and rewrote a second, and then I did the third, and then he did the final.
Okay.
So it was,
that each pass you pick up a little bit of each other's voice. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yep. Trying to smooth it out so that we all have the whole thing has the same voice. And like after I did the first pass, he added a ton of material to make it. He added a lot of the Bombo parts, because he knows that character better than anybody else. But he added Alister parts too that were quite funny.
Is that is that a process that you would like to do again? Was it a positive experience for you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. See, this is maybe the best thing that came out of Legendarium was that I didn't have a lot of confidence after years and years of rejections and selling 7 copies of a anthology and stuff like that. I was feeling like, maybe I really suck at this and I should just quit. And whenever I would feel that way, Michael would just chase the little black birds away, and it built up my confidence. And then to have so many people like that book, it really built my confidence. And then I felt like, oh, okay, I actually can do this. And from that point forward, I felt much better about my skill and my craft. And not that I don't have room to learn and improve, because everybody does, but
Sure.
after that book came out, then I felt like, okay, I can do this, and people will want to read what I have to say, and I've just been going forward ever since, and I've finally gotten myself on a writing schedule that I can stick to and be productive on.
Well, we I think as writers we look at this as a very solitary endeavor. Um, that it's you sit at the keyboard and you bleed and all the the trite sayings that have been kind of bandied about writers, but there's and we've talked about this on the podcast with several different people lately. There really does seem to be, and I think this is a byproduct of indie publishing and the indie community as much as anything. But there definitely seems to be this spirit of collaboration and cooperation, especially in the last year or so. Lots of anthologies, lots of collections, and authors coming together to support each other and put out
Yeah.
co-produced works. And I think Legendarium is an excellent uh, illustration of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's I would add that the indie authors do a lot to encourage one another.
Absolutely. Excuse me.
And yeah, and Legendarium, it really pulled me out of the rut that I was in, and it cemented the friendship that I'd established with Michael, and honestly, from that I've met a ton of other indie authors like this guy Hank Garner, and it's cool. It's a community of people that want to see each other do well, and it doesn't seem like there's. I mean, I'm sure there's some backstabbing and stuff like that goes on, but it seems like there's a lot of people that are out there trying to encourage one another and try to build each other up.
Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, there's going to be backstabbing anytime two humans get together, but I think the good definitely outshines the bad.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So did you catch the huge DS9 reference that's in Legendarium?
I did not.
So there's a chapter in there called Beyond the Stars, which is
Yes.
written by a character named Russell Benjamin. And of course, if you think about the Far Beyond the
Yeah.
Stars episode of DS9, the character's name is Benjamin Russell,
Benjamin
Benny Russell.
Yes. And I thought that just as soon as you said that, but for some reason when I read over it, it totally went over my head. Uh, so cool. Is that something that do you try to bury little Easter eggs of hints at your geekdom and the things that you do?
Yeah, and I mean, Legendarium is a story where I could get away with that. I do it in some of my other stuff too, but Legendarium, I could be more overt about it.
Right.
But I just wanted to sort of do an homage to the Star Trek work that I had done, and it's there, and some people picked up on it, and it was cool. I just had somebody, one of the new readers from the Audible sale, just contacted me recently, and it said, "I just was wondering, was that a DS9 reference?" Oh yeah,
You win the golden ticket. No doubt. Uh, Kevin, tell me about this weird Western.
Okay, so for a while I was pursuing the traditional publishing route, I was also really trying to break into writing comic books. I've collected comic books for 30 years, and yeah, I loved it. I wanted to do it, and so I figured out how to write scripts. I bought the trade of the Sandman that had a Neil Gaiman script in the back of it, and I
Do you
worked
love
on.
Sandman?
I like it. It's not my
Yeah.
favorite thing, but it's quite good. It's dated. It feels a little dated to me now, but it's still good. You like it?
I do. But like you said, I went through and reread most of the early run. I guess 2 years ago, some last year, and And yeah, it does feel dated. Gaiman is brilliant, but it does feel dated.
Have you?
We have this kind of joke at my house that I dig out pieces of things that I grew up with that I hold as sacred in my heart, and movies and things like that. And then I tell my kids about it. I've told them about it for years. And then I'll show them a movie or something that I remember as so epic. But then we watch it, and it just doesn't hold up. Like, my memory is so much better than the actual thing is.
Oh
And
yeah.
so my kids tease me about that. I'll say, you guys, you've got to read this or you've got to watch this, and they'll say, "Was this one of those things that's better in your head than it is actually?" And yeah, probably. But
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that. Like,
yeah,
what is that movie? The Never Ending Story. Everybody loves the Never
yeah,
Ending Story. And I got it and tried to watch it with my kids, and I couldn't even get to the opening credits because of the music, the
yeah,
'80s music.
it's pretty bad.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but there's some of that stuff that really holds up. Like maybe my number one movie, number one or number two is Stand by Me.
yeah,
I mean, that movie is as good today as it was in '86 or whenever it came out. It's
yep,
just such a great movie. And anyway, back to comics.
yeah,
I was working on trying to break into comics, and I conceived this idea for a weird Western miniseries. And I found an artist, and he was really great, and we started working together. And I scripted out a 5-issue miniseries, and he started drawing it. And then he had a full-time job or something, and it just it didn't work out. He couldn't deliver it quickly, and years were starting to go by, and it was just clear that this project was never going to happen, and so we just shelved it. And I had completed scripts, conceived characters and everything, and so I dug it back out, and I decided I would try to turn it into a serialized novel. And I started working on it, and it became The Man Who Shot John Wilkes Booth. And I turned it from a 5-part comic into a 3-part novel. And part 1 is out. Part 2 is done. It's off at the beta readers, and part 3 will be sometime next year. Part
yeah.
2 will be hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Part 2 will be out.
What's the story about?
Well, in real life, John Wilkes Booth, after he shot Lincoln, he fled from D.C. into Virginia, and he ended up in a farm at somebody's farm in Virginia, and he was hiding out in the barn. And a group of Union soldiers were sent to pursue him, and they came and cornered him in this barn. They set the barn on fire, and a guy named Boston Corbett shot him and killed him. And there was some talk that Corbett was going to be court-martialed, but he wasn't. And he went to be kind of a minor celebrity, and he ended up out in Kansas, and he became the doorman at the Kansas legislature. And then one day, somebody said something he didn't like, and he started waving a gun around. He was arrested, and he was thrown into a sanitarium, and then he escaped the asylum and went off into the night and was never seen again. This is all true. And I just thought that was a fascinating story. So I started at the end of Truth, and I invented this newspaper man who is contacted by Boston Corbett while he's in the asylum, and kind of played up on the idea that there was a secret society that conspired to kill Lincoln, and Corbett knows all about it, and he's trying to reveal the truth to someone, so they'll print it in their newspaper. And so my fictional character goes to the asylum and meets him, and gets swept up into the escape and other things that happen following it that become the realm of fiction.
Awesome. I think that's a really great idea. Taking what you said, following truth to the end of known truth, and then picking up from there and inventing what happens next. The Apocalypse Weird novel that I'm working on, I do a little bit of that. I take some known history from the area of the world I'm from, and then kind of take a left turn from there. Did you ever see the movie Finding Forrester with Sean Connery?
I don't think so.
It's kind of a J.D. Salinger type character. He wrote one epic 20th century novel and then became reclusive after that. And he meets a young boy from the bad neighborhood where he now lives, and starts mentoring him to be a writer. And he gives him a piece of advice that he said, if you can't find your words, take someone else's words, start there, and then let your words kind of take over. And the movie's pretty hokey in a lot of ways, but that was pretty good advice. That take something that and then kind of invent the rest of it from there.
Yeah.
Is that something that inspires you often? Do you look at things and think, what if, and things like that?
Oh, absolutely. I'm fascinated by history, and that era of history in particular. I live in Virginia, and of course, this is Civil War Central here, and
Right.
That story, the Civil War story, just fascinates me. So, as I was looking through, different books, and I read a biography of Lincoln, and I think that's where I discovered Corbett, and it just sort of steamrolled from there.
Okay. What'd you do with the biography of Lincoln? Did you publish that?
Oh, no. I read it.
Oh, I thought you said you wrote it. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that would be pretty awesome, but
That would be. So, Kevin, tell me how a science fiction, fantasy, and comic book lover comes to live on a farm.
Well, when my wife was a little girl, she read a series of books by a gal named Laura Ingalls Wilder.
Never heard of
And yeah, and these books made her fall in love with the idea of farming. And so she started to volunteer at a colonial farm that was near where she lived. And when she became an adult, they offered her a job, and she worked at this colonial farm. And they raised all kinds of heritage animals and would wear the old-fashioned clothes and churn butter by hand and stuff like that. And she loved farming. That's all she ever wanted to do, just the way that I was with writing. And so when we got married, she clung to this idea that someday we would go and move to a farm. And at first I didn't think it was something that was real. I would tell her, I'll get a book deal someday, and then I'll buy you a farm, right? And that wasn't what she wanted. She wanted to be doing it now while our kids were young, and
right.
So she kept looking into different ways that we could do it, and finally she talked me into it. But I was working full time, an hour and a half away from where we lived, and I was commuting every single day, and it was miserable, and I wasn't involved with the farm at all. It was just her thing. And then when my mom died, I got a little bit of money, just enough for me to feel confident enough to start freelancing and contracting instead of working in the city full time. And then I was here, and I started getting involved with the farm, and I started to really like it. I took to the work, and it's like the classic story of how a man goes out and chops firewood or messes around on a car in the garage or something, and he feels more content that way than he ever does on the high-paying job. In my whole life, I dropped out of college, and I craved to the idea of being an editor and having a job where they would send me to Hawaii and let me speak in front of crowds and chair panels and stuff like that. Well, I got that job. I was the editor of a trade magazine, and they were sending me to Hawaii on business trips and doing conferences and stuff like that. And I didn't like it. I did not like the travel. I didn't like being away from home. And I was here, and I was butchering chickens and slopping hogs and cleaning barn stalls and stuff. And I loved doing it. It kept me outside, and it was physically challenging, and it was something to really balance off the writing, and I just embraced it. It took me a couple of years to embrace it, but I've lost a bunch of weight from living this lifestyle, and I feel just happier doing it. So that's how we ended up out here. We live in Rappahannock County in the shadow of the Blue Ridge Mountains. We're really close to Skyline Drive, and we have just a small place, and we raise all our own meat, and then we raise a little bit to sell for other people. And it's a lot of work, but it's good work. It's unusual.
Yeah. How would you say that the farming life has affected your writing?
It's really forced me to put writing in a box and know that I have only a certain amount of time every single day, and I can't go over that time. So I've had to be more disciplined with the writing if I want to do it at all. And there's definitely days when I don't do it because the farm work just overwhelms it. And then there's other days where I don't do any farm work and I write all day. But for the most part, it's just forced me to keep it in a balance, and knowing that I only have a certain window every day, I utilize that window to its max.
Do you feel like the quality of your words is higher, knowing that you have to focus on that window?
I don't know if the quality is higher. What it's forced me to do is the thing that I always told my students, but I didn't actually do, which is to write in drafts. So now I just scoot through a first draft as fast as I can, and then I go back through and amend it in second draft. And I used to try to write one perfect draft, and that was it. And I just don't have time for that. There's no way. So I just fly through the first draft as fast as I can, and if a character starts with blonde hair and ends up with red hair, well, I'll fix it in second draft. It's cool.
Are you a pantser or are you an outliner?
I used to outline everything.
Just
meticulous outline, but I mostly just pants it now. I have a decent idea of where I'm going, and I might jot down a couple paragraphs about this is where these are a couple things that I want them to do, but it's really like a one sentence here, a one sentence there, two sentences there, and that's it. So I'm mostly just pantsing it now. And Legendarium had an outline of maybe 4 paragraphs. Through the whole thing, and it was just real rough. I want them to go to Alice in Wonderland. I want them to go to Moby Dick, that kind of thing. I didn't know what was going to happen when they got there.
Awesome. Do you find yourself with being mostly a pantser? Do you find yourself getting to a point in the story and you just don't know where to go next? Does that ever happen to you?
Oh yeah. But like one of the things that I would do in my class is I would do like the word bubble brainstorming thing, and I would just I talk to myself all the time. I can't work in public because I sound like a lunatic. But I'll get a yellow legal pad, and I'll just draw circles, and I'll say, well, what direction could we go in here? And this could happen, and that could happen. And usually I can work myself out of it. Sometimes I have to go back and cut a little bit off the story because I went in the wrong direction. Almost all the time, if I get stuck, it's because I've already gone in the wrong direction, and I have to cut out 3,000 words to fix it.
Oh, that's painful.
I know it is, but it's it's just one of those things that you got to do. Oh, right. Yeah. You know exactly how it feels like, right?
Oh, I do. I know exactly how it feels. When you have a folder on your computer that's just full of all the stuff that you've cut out that you're afraid to throw away because you might use it one day. Yeah.
Right.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah. Kevin, what's coming up next for you?
Well, I'm about to have part 2 of my Western come out. Like I said, it's off at beta readers, and hopefully be in the next couple weeks. And right now I'm working on an Apocalypse Weird story, and that's pretty much it. My deadline is April 1st, so I'm just chugging away on this thing and trying to do a knockout first draft.
What part of the world is yours set in?
Mine is set in New Hampshire, and basically, my apocalyptic event is a eternal winter that comes to New Hampshire. And I mean, it pretty much feels like that in New Hampshire anyway. But this is a winter where they don't get that 3 weeks of summer. And all of the power is going to get knocked out in the entire state. And there's going to be a guy that is like the religious radio personality that is going to be the the big bad guy, and he's going to be controlling a lot of smaller characters that run through the story, and cause trouble for my hero.
Awesome. Where can people find you to dig into to your work and to follow what's going on with you?
KevinGSummers.com.
KevinGSummers.com. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Kevin, it's been a blast having you on, and I hope that you find continued success.
Thank you, Hank. I appreciate the interview.